So it's a warm evening, June 1989. We're in Connecticut, and if you were standing outside the home of Terry and Philip Traffic Honda, the scene would just be pure chaos.
Total chaos. You've got Philip chasing Terry across the yard.
And she is, absolutely terrified. She's clutching her infant son, sprinting to a neighbor's house just to get away.
Right. And Philip is drunk. He's screaming, and then he manages to actually grab the baby out of her arms.
Oh, no.
Jumps into his truck and just peels out of the driveway.
That is every parent's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
So she calls 911, obviously.
Immediately. She tells the dispatcher everything, that her husband has basically kidnapped their child. He's intoxicated, driving dangerously. She's terrified for her son's life.
So the police show up,
Mm-hmm.
2 officers. But the really tragic part here is that they already know this couple.
They know them very well.
They'd arrested Philip just 2 weeks before this for beating Terry. So, the history is there. The red flags are everywhere.
Absolutely. And on this night, Philip eventually comes back. He brings the baby inside.
And Terry, she's so scared that the police being there might make things worse, right? She actually tells the operator to call them off.
She does, but it's too late. They're already on the scene. And they start to, assess the situation.
And this is where it all goes wrong.
This is the pivot point. The officers, they look at Terry, they look at Philip, and they decide that because there's no visible serious injury on her that night, their hands are tied.
They just see it as a domestic dispute?
A domestic dispute that has calmed down, so they leave.
They just leave.
They leave.
Even though he had locked her out of the bedroom, he was starving her. Literally. 1 meal a day. He took her car keys
Mm-hmm.
and even told her she couldn't use the downstairs bathroom,
Right.
and they just left.
Yes. Because he hadn't, punched her in the face in front of them, they felt they had no legal grounds to do anything.
And just a few hours later,
Hours later, just after 2 a.m., Philip shot and killed her.
it's devastating. But the reason we're starting with this story isn't just about the tragedy itself. It's the legal aftermath, which is almost as shocking.
It really is. Her family sued the town for wrongful death.
And they lost.
They lost, and it's so important to understand why they lost. The court basically ruled that, under the standard view of domestic violence, the police couldn't have predicted this lethal outcome.
Because of the nonviolent stuff.
Exactly. The law saw the starvation, the bathroom restrictions, all of that as marital problems, not criminal acts leading to murder.
And that failure, that massive blind spot on the law, is exactly what we're unpacking in this deep dive. We're looking at the work of Evan Stark, his book Coercive Control, and some really important updates from 2018.
Right. The whole mission here is to understand why that domestic violence revolution of the 70s and 80s just stalled.
And to shift how we look at this.
Yeah.
To stop seeing abuse as just a fight or a series of incidents.
And start seeing it for what it is, a liberty crime?
A liberty crime. I love that phrase. We're really going to get into what that means, because for so long we've all been trained to look for the bruise.
Right. No bruise, no crime.
But the sources we're digging into today argue that the bruise is just the very, very tip of the iceberg. The real crime is the entrapment.
Exactly. And to get this liberty crime concept, we have to go back a bit. Think about the 1970s.
Okay.
This was the explosion of the shelter movement. You had Woman House in St. Paul, Chiswick Women's Aid in London. It was this huge grassroots revolution.
Just women opening their doors for other women, purely about safety.
Mm-hmm. And we think of this as this huge success, new laws, shelters, mandatory arrests. We thought we kind of fixed the problem.
It seems like it should have been.
And it was a success in many ways. But there's this massive, almost unbelievable paradox hidden in the data.
Okay.
It's one of those findings that makes you stop and just reread the page. When you look at the homicide rate since 1976, the domestic violence revolution actually saved men's lives way more than it saved women's.
Wait, say that again. We built shelters for women, we passed laws to protect women, and the data shows that men benefited more in terms of survival.
It sounds completely backwards, doesn't it? But the numbers in the source material are really clear.
Okay, lay them on me.
Since 1976, the number of men killed by their female partners dropped by nearly 70%.
70, wow. Okay, a huge drop.
A huge drop. But the number of women killed by male partners?
Much smaller.
Much, much smaller. It only dropped by about 30%.
So that's a massive difference. What is going on there? Why?
It all comes down to the exit strategy. Before there were shelters, before there was any real legal help, a woman trapped with a violent abuser felt like she had one way out.
To kill him before he killed her.
Kill or be killed. It was desperate self-defense. So when women got shelters, when they got other options, they stopped killing their abusers. They had an alternative.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
The shelters worked. They de-escalated the women's desperation.
Exactly.
But the flip side, why didn't men stop killing women at the same rate?
Because of the interventions, like mandatory arrest, they failed to stop the men from escalating. The whole system was built to react to a physical injury, an incident.
So the system was waiting for a broken bone while the abuser was methodically tightening the net.
Precisely. The system couldn't see the siege, only the final battle. And if you look at the racial specifics, it's even more dramatic.
How so?
For black men, the drop in being killed by their partners was 82% between 1976 and 2004.
82%. That's incredible. So the services were working to de-escalate that lethal defensive violence?
Yes. But they didn't dismantle the abuser's strategy. He was still operating with, almost total impunity right up until the moment he decided to end her life.
And speaking of impunity, the sources use this phrase, the lottery of justice, which does not sound promising.
It's really not. We have these mandatory arrest policies, right? Police see a bruise, they're supposed to make an arrest.
Supposed to.
But Stark breaks down the whole funnel, from the 911 call to the arrest to prosecution to an actual conviction. And when you run all those numbers,
It's not good.
the chance of an abuser actually going to jail for any single incident of abuse is roughly 1 in 10,000.
1 in 10,000.
Yeah.
You literally have better odds on a scratch-off ticket.
Stark says it's slightly better than winning a lottery. So this whole idea of relying on the criminal justice system to stop abuse by focusing on single physical incidents, it's just statistically failing. It is not working.
Which brings us right back to Terry Trafficanda. She wasn't killed by a single punch. She was killed by a web of entrapment the law couldn't even see. So this is where we really need to define Evan Stark's concept of coercive control, because I think for a lot of people listening, control can sound a little vague.
Sure. Like, oh, he's just bossy. Or she's just a bit jealous.
Exactly.
And Stark is so clear that this is way more than being bossy. It is a strategic pattern of oppression. He breaks it down into 4 key tactics. Physical violence is one, yes. But the others are intimidation, isolation, and control.
And the source material has this really powerful analogy. It compares the victim not to, like, a boxer in a ring, but to a hostage.
Or a prisoner of war. And it's a very accurate comparison.
How so?
Well, think about a POW. The harm isn't just that they might get hit. The harm is the total loss of autonomy.
Yeah.
They're deprived of rights, resources, their personhood. They're cut off from the world. The captor decides when they eat, when they sleep, who they can talk to.
And that shows up in what Stark calls micro-regulation. And honestly, the examples in the text are just chilling because they seem so small, so mundane on their own.
Like Terry Trafficanda being denied toilet paper.
Or a woman being forbidden from washing her hair.
There are documented cases of women forced to record every single penny in a ledger, or having to vacuum the rug until the lines are perfectly straight, and if they're not, doing it over and over and over.
It's not just, I'll hit you if you talk back. It is, I control how you eat, sleep, and use the bathroom. It's a total colonization of a person's life.
Exactly. And that is why Stark calls it a liberty crime. It stops a victim from being a full person, a full citizen. It uses sexual inequality to enforce these very traditional gender roles, cooking, cleaning, sexual service, through fear.
That framing just changes everything. If I grabbed you off the street and locked you in my basement and told you when to use the bathroom, I'd go to prison for years. It's kidnapping.
A felony.
But if I do it in the kitchen, historically, that's just a bad marriage.
And that distinction between the street and the home is what these new laws are trying to fix. The 2018 review by Stark and Hester gives a really good look at how the law is trying to pivot, specifically in the UK.
Right, they talk about the difference between the law in England versus Scotland, which at first seems like a technicality, but it's actually huge.
Oh, it's massive. So England and Wales passed a law in 2015 against coercive and controlling behavior, and that was a huge step, to be clear.
It put the concept on the books.
It did. But the critique is that the English law focuses way too much on the victim's state of mind. It requires proof of fear or serious alarm or distress.
Which puts the whole burden on the victim. You have to get on the stand and prove you were terrified.
Right. But what if you're not screaming? What if you're numb? Or what if you've learned to be stoic just to survive?
Exactly. You might mask your fear to keep the peace. If the law needs you to look terrified, but you've learned to look calm to avoid a beating, The law fails you.
Now compare that to Scotland. In 2018, they passed what our sources call the gold standard of domestic abuse law.
And what makes it the gold standard?
Well, for one, it's comprehensive. It covers partners even if they don't live together. But the crucial part is it focuses on the objective intent of the perpetrator to control.
Not the subjective fear of the victim.
Exactly. The question becomes, would a reasonable person think this behavior is likely to cause harm?
That is a subtle but really powerful shift. It's saying what you are doing is the crime, regardless of how the victim reacts.
Correct. And this lines up with some fascinating new research in the papers. Coercive control is not a type of violence. It is a condition.
A condition. Break that down for me.
Okay, so a study of almost 1,000 couples found that the level of control, even without a lot of physical violence, was the strongest predictor of violence after separation.
Threats to life, things like that.
Exactly.
So if you're listening and thinking, well, he never hits me, so I must be safe, but he's checking your phone, controlling your money, isolating you from friends.
You might actually be at a higher risk of being killed than someone in a relationship with a lot of fights, but less of that systematic control. It's the invisible danger.
The system looks for the black eye, but the high control is actually the bigger red flag for lethality.
That's right. Which leads to this terrifying term from the research. Separation engendered violence?
Meaning the violence happens when you try to leave.
Yes. For the abuser, the most dangerous moment is when they're losing control. So they escalate, often to lethal violence, to try and get it back.
It just completely demolishes that question. Why doesn't she just leave?
It does. Leaving is often the trigger.
I want to broaden the scope a bit here. We've mostly been talking in a heterosexual context, the patriarchy model.
Yeah.
How does coercive control work in LGBTQ relationships?
That's a vital question. And yeah, it absolutely applies. For a long time, there was this debate, is abuse about patriarchy or is it gender neutral?
Yeah.
But research from Donovan and Hester shows coercive control is definitely present in LGBTQ relationships too.
Is it the same playbook, though? Or does it change?
The core mechanic of entrapment is the same, but the specific tactics can shift. For instance, the data shows men in gay relationships report more forced sex and financial abuse,
Okay.
whereas women in lesbian relationships report more emotional abuse and a lot of manipulation around parenting roles.
So the abuser uses whatever leverage is available in that specific dynamic.
Precisely. And the source also busts a huge myth here, the idea of mutual abuse.
Oh, this is a big one. You hear it all the time. They're just a toxic couple.
It takes two to tango, right? People assume if both people are shouting or even pushing, it must be mutual. But the data shows mutual violent control, where both people are actually fighting for dominance, is incredibly rare.
So there's almost always a primary aggressor.
Yes. One person is trying to dominate, the other is resisting or just trying to survive.
Fighting back isn't the same as being an abuser.
Resistance is not abuse,
Right.
exactly.
And what about the kids? In these conversations, children are so often just called witnesses. But the sources we're looking at argue they are much more than that.
This is one of the most heartbreaking parts of the research. Kids are not passive. They're often used in what the text calls tangential spouse abuse.
Tangential spouse abuse. What does that mean? The child is a weapon.
Yes. The abuser uses the child to control the mother, threatening to take them, undermining her authority in front of them. But on the other side of that, children have their own agency. They engage in what's called safety work.
Safety work. It sounds like something a construction worker does.
In a way, they are construction workers of their own safety in that home. They strategize. They form an alliance with their mom to protect her. Or, and this is really tough, sometimes they align with the abuser.
I join in.
They might. They might tell dad where mom went or criticize her cooking, not because they're bad kids, but because they're smart survivors. They see where the power is, and they align with it to stay safe.
It's a survival strategy in a war zone. It's tragic, but it makes a terrifying kind of sense. It actually reminds me of that reference in the source material to the British radio show, The Archers.
Yes. The storyline with Helen and Rob was a huge cultural moment in the UK.
And it was all about coercive control.
It was. Rob didn't beat Helen every day. He gaslighted her, controlled what she wore, isolated her from family. And because it played out over months on the radio, the public got to feel that slow, dripping erosion of a person.
It wasn't a 2-hour movie. It was the daily grind.
Exactly. It helped millions of people understand that abuse isn't just an explosion. It's the process of making someone doubt their own reality.
So wrapping this all up, if we had to give the listener one big takeaway, What is the fundamental shift we need to make?
I think it's that we have to redefine safety. Safety isn't just stepping a punch. Safety is restoring liberty.
The revolution stalled because we treated the symptom, the violence, instead of the disease, which is the control.
We arrested the guys who hit, but we left the guys who entrap almost completely alone.
And that's the challenge. How do you prosecute something that, on the surface, can look like everyday life? Checking a bank account is normal.
But checking it to make sure your partner has $0 to escape with. That's a crime. Context is everything. We have to ask our justice system and ourselves to stop looking at snapshots and start watching the whole movie.
To see the pattern. It goes right back to Terry Traficanda. If the police had seen the whole movie, the starvation, the isolation, instead of just the snapshot of that one night.
The outcome might have been completely different. And that brings me to the final thought I want to leave you with.
Let's hear it.
We all accept that the state has a duty to intervene if someone is kidnapped off the street. It's a fundamental violation of human rights.
Of course.
So if we truly start to see domestic abuse as a liberty crime, a human rights violation happening inside the home, doesn't that mean the state has a much greater obligation to intervene? Not just to protect bodies from bruises, but to guarantee freedom itself.
That's a huge question. Why is the home the one place where our basic right to liberty seems to just stop at the front door? And why, after all this time, does it remain the place where so many people are the least free?
That's the question we all need to be wrestling with.
A lot to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.